All right, John 15 is where we're at. Let's read a few verses in John 15. If you do not have a Bible, we'd love to give you one. Go by our guest center. We will just hand it to you. It'll be a gift to you. And if you don't have a Bible, there is this little outline in your bulletin, and it has the verses, everything. You can follow along with us if you don't have one. But John 15, let's read verses 12 through 16. This is Jesus talking 24 hours before he's crucified. Here's Jesus. This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. Greater love hath no man than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends. Ye are my friends, if you do whatsoever I command you. Henceforth I call you not servants, for the servant knoweth not what his Lord doeth, but I have called you friends. For all things that I have heard of my Father, I have made known unto you. Ye have not chosen me, but I have chosen you, and ordained you that ye should go and bring forth fruit, and that your fruit should remain, that whatsoever ye shall ask of the Father in my name, he may give it you. Friends is clearly the topic in view as you look at this brief snippet of Scripture. Friendship really is a theme all throughout the Bible. You find a lot of scriptures on it, but this is the clearest point in all of Scripture that Jesus himself addresses the topic of friendship, and I'd like to address that with you this morning. But before we do, I'm going to pray, and we're going to have one more song, and then we're going to roll up our sleeves and get to work on this brief passage of Scripture to try to understand friendship a bit better. In the Bible, friends are often spoken of like this. This is about Jonathan and David in 1 Samuel. It says, the soul of Jonathan was knit with the soul of David. Jonathan loved him as his own soul. The biblical idea of friendship is the imagery of souls being knit together. More than just mental agreement, more than just sexual attraction. Souls being knit together means that there's common interests, common passions, common loves. Ralph Waldo Emerson has an essay on friendship. A lot of it I disagree with, frankly, but there's a part that I do agree with where he says that friendship is not so much asking, do you love me, as it is asking, do you see the same truth? He said the typical way a friendship starts is by saying, what, you too? I thought I was the only one. That you find a common ground or a common interest with another person. This is why people who only want friends never make any friends. Ever met someone like that? That they just wanted to have a friend and they felt lonely and they wanted a friend so bad, but they couldn't make any. Because the condition for making friends is that you want something else besides friends. If someone says to you, hey, do you see the same truth as me? And you say, you know what, I don't really care about that truth. All I want is you as my friend. You'll never have a friend. You'll never have any commonality or any common ground to work from, and no real friendship can start. You have to have common passions and interests and beliefs and a sense of oneness. This is the raw material for forming a friendship. But that's the beginning of a friendship. If you have that with someone, that does not mean that the friendship will develop and blossom into a lifetime friendship. That will somehow grow into a best friend or a close friend or someone that you really enjoy time with. How do you get from a potential friendship to a true friendship? Well, there are marks of friendships, marks of ways to make a potential friend a good friend. And John 15 really weighs in on this. It gives us two particular marks of what it means to be a friend. I'll put it this way. Friendships are marked by vulnerable transparency and by sacrificial loyalty. If you look in verse 15 of John 15, Jesus says, henceforth I call you not servants, for the servant knoweth not what his Lord doeth. But I have called you friends, for all things that I have heard of my Father, I have made known unto you. Jesus says servants don't really know the heart of the one that they serve. They just show up and do what they're told. But friends are different, and I'm not calling you servant anymore. I'm calling you friends. I'm letting you in. I'm telling you secrets. I will let you see who I am. He mentioned in verse 13 the sacrificial loyalty part. He says, greater love hath no man than this, than a man lay down his life for his friends, specifically talking about what he will do on the cross, but more broadly applying to our friendships. That a friend is someone who sacrifices, who's loyal, who puts himself out, who gives of himself, who makes sacrifices. You could put that long phrase, friendships are marked by vulnerable transparency and sacrificial loyalty, this way. A friend always lets you in and never lets you down. That's what a friend is. And you need both. Not just one to the exclusion of the other, but you actually need both of those. If you have someone that you can pour your guts out to, but they're never there to help you in your time of need, you don't have a friend. You got a therapy group. You just got a group of people or someone that you can talk to. If you have a friend who's the opposite, who's always there for you, but you can never talk to them and never open up and never be vulnerable, you don't have a friend. You have a social worker. You need both of these to have a friend. These are unmistakable marks of friendship, and I want to use these as a way of gauging the depth of your own friendships horizontally with those that are maybe sitting next to you or those that are at home or your family. But then more importantly, and what Jesus really does in this text, I want to use this to apply this vertically to your relationship with God, not just horizontally. But let's start horizontally. There's this idea of a friendship being vulnerable, being transparent, always letting you in. Jesus says in verse 15, I've told you everything. I'm letting you in. Which means very practically that friends tell secrets. Not to other people, but to each other. If you have a friend, that's someone that you tell things to that you don't normally tell the rest of the world. Ever tried to befriend someone who was guarded and clammed up and never could let their hair down? That's a frustrating experience, isn't it? I had someone literally call me this week. I didn't tell them to call me about this. It just so happened. They called me this week on Thursday and said, hey, I want some advice. There's someone I'm really trying to befriend, and I'm inviting them into my life. I'm trying to spend time with them. I'm trying to, be nice. And generally I can make a friend, but they just are shutting me down. They're walled up. They're shielded. They're hesitant. I can't do it. It's frustrating me. What am I supposed to do with this? Because you're supposed to share and you want that to be reciprocated. Friends are supposed to share secrets. Ever told a friend something very intimate and very close, and you took that next step and that next level of vulnerability and that next level of transparency, and they didn't get it? They laughed, or they changed the subject, just went over their head. What happens in that moment? It's a punch to the gut. You're hurt and you're wounded, and next time you are potentially going to open up to them, you'll be very cautious to open up to them because that wasn't handled the right way. The art of friendship really is opening up to somebody and encouraging them to do so progressively in stages. That happens layer by layer, little by little. You can't do this too quickly or too slowly. Some of you know what it's like to be in a dating relationship where you killed the relationship because you opened up too quickly. It was the first day you were connecting, sparks were flying, so you thought that you would tell them your life story. All the skeletons in the closet, all of the messy past, you just poured it all out. And what happened? They ran. The pastor, I just wanted to be an open book. Good. Open the book to chapter 1 and read that chapter slowly before you get to chapter 10. You don't do that on the first date. That's not what happens. You'll kill the relationship, even if there's potential there. But if you open up too slowly, you'll kill the relationship. You keep it in first gear and keep it on chapter 1, and you never progressively get to know each other a little better and start to get into some of those tougher conversations and start to reveal some of those things you're not that proud of. That has to happen incrementally, and you have to have this, I'm trusting you and you're trusting me, and we're exchanging this back and forth. Friends tell secrets. They open up. They let you in. Here's what I look like without my makeup on. Here's what I'm feeling like. Here's what's going on in my head. There's transparency there. Vulnerability there. Friends are supposed to be able to take and give criticism well. Proverbs tells us that faithful are the wounds of a friend. There are some things that you need to hear about yourself that you don't want to hear about yourself. And there are times where you won't hear it from anyone other than a good friend. Time where mom and dad won't suffice, your siblings won't suffice, your coworkers and colleagues won't suffice, that you need someone who is a good, long friend. Someone that you can't just write off as they don't know me or they don't care about me, because they do know you and they do care about you, that they need to be able to speak into your life and tell you the tough truth. This is how you turn potential friends into long friends, is there's vulnerable transparency. You let people in. It takes a lot of work to do this, to make a long-time friend, but that's how you do it. Then there's sacrificial loyalty, the idea that you never let somebody down. A few years ago, 2005, New York commemorated what happened in May of 1947 with the Brooklyn Dodgers. That was the year that Jackie Robinson came into the Professional Baseball League, and he was the first player to break the color barrier. He was the first black man to play baseball professionally. And early in that season, they had their second road series, which was in Cincinnati. The Brooklyn Dodgers took the field in the bottom of the first. Some of you may have seen this depicted in the movie 42 or read about it, but they took the field, and there the Cincinnati fans began to boo and to jeer and to taunt and heckle relentlessly Jackie Robinson, so much so the game could not even be played. And it went and it went and it went. And finally, all-star shortstop Pee Wee Reese walked over to Jackie Robinson and he put his arm around him. And everybody shut up. What happened in that moment? I don't know really before then how close Pee Wee and Jackie were. I don't know after then how close they are, honestly. But I do know in that moment that Jackie probably could have used a friend, and he had a friend who didn't let him down, who stepped up to the plate and said, I'm here. Jesus says in verse 13 that a true friend lays down something. He says that he's going to lay down his life. But the practical point is that a friend lays down something. Schedule, convenience, money, something. You sacrifice something for the good of someone else. You give of yourself. Just before this passage, 2 verses prior, verse 10, almost in the preceding breath, Jesus had told his disciples to abide in his love or to stick with it. Friendship is about sticking with people through thick and thin. And the most practical way, you just make time for each other. I know that's very difficult. We all have very demanding schedules, and a lot of things can clutter up our schedules, but a true friend will do that. Will make time for the other friends. This is why the idea of our groups, we've had in the announcement video today that we have an open enrollment period through September for our groups. This Sunday and next Sunday is the last that you can enroll. If you're new to Harvest and you're looking for kind of a community or somewhere to connect, we'd love for you to be a part of that. But I have found in talking and encouraging people to be involved in a group at their church that they're fond of the idea of making relationships. They're fond of the idea of having community. They're fond of the idea of getting to know other people. And even if they're introverted, deep down, they want someone else to know them and to not be as lonely. They want that, but they're not very fond of the idea of carving out an hour or an hour and a half every single week to make that happen. But that's how friendships are formed. You can't shortcut that. You can't short-circuit that. You have to invest the time. You have to be committed to that. A true friend will invest in it, will stick with it. Proverbs tells us once again that a friend loves at all times. Tells us that there is a friend that sticks closer than a brother. This is, by the way, why you can't have 500 friends. I know Facebook tells you otherwise, but you can't have 500 friends like that. I would love for each and every one of you to be my best friend. Well, maybe 90% of you, not maybe all of you, but most of you. Honestly, I would. I love our church family. I love spending time with people. I love having people in my house and going to your house and getting coffee and all that sort of stuff. But I can't be great friends with everybody. It's impossible to do this for everybody, but there should be some of that, and you can apply this to your relationships. But more importantly than our human relationships, which are indispensable. Honestly, they're irreplaceable. You need that. Loneliness is not a good thing. That's why solitary confinement is a punishment. To sequester someone away from the rest of humanity is a punishment and kind of a torture. You're not a tree or a machine. You need friendships. You need that humanly. But even humanly, you won't be able to scratch the itch completely. A lot of your time with your friends will be spent in frustration. Because they let you down. Why? Because they're human. They're not perfect. And it does get lost on them what exactly you were trying to say. And they did cease to show up to that or step up to the plate. And they did, perhaps misspeak or they didn't let you in as you wanted them to, or maybe you did the same to them. We know, we see this. A friend always lets you in and never lets you down. Those are kind of big statements. And you can think, well, I don't always let my friend in and I don't never let them down. I do, cease to let them in. I do fail them sometimes. But there is a friendship that you need that's above all else, and that's friendship with Jesus, who far surpasses any human friendship. This is what Jesus says in this text, and this is the most important part of this text. Jesus says to his disciples, God in the flesh says, I make you my friends. You are my friends. Now, this is very unique to Christianity. Most religions will say that that's crazy. Eastern religions will say that God is beyond emotion, God is beyond grief, God is beyond joy and tears, and therefore there's no way you can have friendship with God. The ancient Greeks said that God was apatheia. He was apathetic. God's not capable of relationship. God's not capable of emotion, so that won't happen. Even the ancient Jews thought that being the friend of God was sort of possible for the really spiritual elite, the superb people. That Abraham was known as the friend of God, and that Moses talked with God as a man talks with his friend, and that was available for them if you were really, really special and stellar in your spiritual life, but not to anybody else. Aristotle wrote very wisely about friendships, but something he said that the Bible disagrees with is that you can never be friends with a God. He believed in multiple gods, and Aristotle said you can never be friends with a God. However you relate to the gods, you can't be friends with one. And he said this because he thought that friendship was only possible with social equals. You have to have that common footing of the same amount of social power, the same amount of money, the same amount of education, the same race, the same amount of power, something like that. And because God is an altogether different being and bigger and stronger, that there's no way you could have common ground with him. There's no way God could be friendly with you. It's not appropriate to talk to God as a friend. Is Aristotle right? He's a smart guy. Is he right? How could God become vulnerable? Friends are vulnerable. How could God become open and transparent? That's what friends are. How could God become loyal, sacrificially? That's what friends do. Is that ridiculous to say that God could befriend us? It's not. Because the scriptures teach, and Christianity teaches, that God came to earth in Jesus. And he lived a perfect life, and he died on a cross, not just because, but he laid down his life willingly for us, sacrificially for us, in our place, to take our sins, to take our punishment, to take our shame. And when Jesus says in verse 13 that greater love hath no man than this, than a man lay down his life for his friends, he's not talking in general. He's talking about what would happen the next day. That the cross would be the ultimate display of friendship. So let's think about this. Vertically, how does this relate to us? That God has vulnerable transparency, that God is a friend who always lets you in. That's what friends are supposed to be, right? Someone who always lets you in, someone who's vulnerable and open. I would tell you, look at the cross. How much more open could God be to you? How much more vulnerable could Jesus be for you? His arms aren't stretched open, they're nailed open. And he is there, open and vulnerable and laying himself out, opening himself up. How much more do you want him to be? And Jesus says, you can be my friend. You can be my friend. Now, frankly, I find this very difficult to articulate, and I try to articulate deep truths like for a living. So it's really difficult for me to press into this, but I'll take a crack at it. If you've ever been lost and needed to ask for directions, I know that those that are a few years younger than me will never experience what this is like because there's a GPS on our phone and we never have to find any directions that way. But I remember in the early days of my driving that I did not have a GPS on my phone, and I had to, a time or two, stop and ask the gas station attendant or someone for directions. And if you needed directions to Nowheresville and you stopped and said, hey, how do I get there? Someone would have one of two options. If they know how to get there, they can say either A, I'll draw you a map. Here you go. And don't you hate when people draw you maps and directions? Ever had that? Go over the railroad tracks, there's a little tree on your right, and then there's this cat that's normally at the end of the drive, but if it's not there, just keep driving. Like, they give you the weirdest maps, but they could draw you a map and you say, okay, I have the directions. I know how to get there. I have a map. Or they could say, hey, I'm headed that way. I'll jump in the car with you and I'll tell you how to get there. Now, I know you probably wouldn't take them up on that. Stranger danger, they'll stab you. I know that. But let's say, for sake of the illustration, they say, okay, come on, get in with me. And they give you turn by turn. A block or two ahead, they'll tell you turn left here, turn right here. They're there in the car with you. That's a lot different than giving you a map. What they're doing is they're giving themselves to you. They're saying, let me jump in the car. Let me take this ride with you. That's relationship, not a map. When it comes to Christianity, Christianity says, do you want guidance? You want direction. You want to know what your purpose for life is. You want to know who you should marry. There's no crystal ball. There's no magic 8-ball that I have that you can shake. There's no tarot cards that you should consult with. What Christianity says is not even, I'll give you the Bible and this will be your roadmap and this will just tell you everything you need to know for life. It's beyond that. It's God gets in the car with you. It's that if you have Jesus as a friend, as your Savior, He does life with you. Through His Spirit, He comes, He communes with you. There's friendship, there's relationship, there's knowing Him and following Him and listening to Him, not just as a servant, but as a friend. God says, I'll open up, I'll be transparent, I'll disclose, I'll come to you, I'll be vulnerable. There's sacrificial loyalty. Never lets you down. This is exactly what Jesus said in verse 13. I will sacrifice myself for you. You know how friends are not supposed to let you down? Well, how much more faithful, how much more sacrificial, how much more giving could Jesus be than to go to the cross? And I want you to think about this for a minute. This was so astounding to me as I thought about this. This is Jesus about 24 hours before his crucifixion telling his disciples, you're friends. 24 hours later, he will be crucified. As he said, I will lay down my life for you. In those 24 hours, what do the friends of Jesus do? One of his friends betrays him, sells him out for 30 pieces of silver, and turns him over to the authorities. 3 of his friends fall asleep on him. His 3 closest friends, Peter, James, and John. John, who's writing this, falls asleep on him. Jesus goes into the garden to pray. His soul is exceedingly sorrowful, even unto death. Some of you know what it's like to have a heavy spirit and a heavy soul, to have something that's weighing on you. And to be in those moments where you just need a friend to talk to or a friend to spend time with you. Jesus goes into that moment and says, will you pray with me and spend time with me for an hour? And they can't do it. They fall asleep. If I called you over to my house and said, hey, you know what, I'm going through a tough time. It's really dark right now. I need you. This is the worst night of my life. I feel like I'm going to die. Will you come sit with me? And you drive over and you sit down and I start to pour out my heart to you and you promptly fall asleep. What would that say about you as a friend? It'd say you're a terrible friend. Here they are falling asleep on him. Peter denies him. Moments later, you know him? He your friend? No. I don't know him. Who's that? No, don't associate me with him. We're not friends. I don't know him. I don't follow him. The rest of them run away and they forsake him. And there he is alone. But thankfully, verse 16 tells us, ye have not chosen me, but I have chosen you. What's that mean? It means that Jesus is the initiator, Jesus is the befriender, Jesus is the one who is pursuing this. This wasn't about these guys and their ability to reciprocate the friendship. This was about, I'm going to be a friend to you. I will still stretch myself open. I will still sacrifice myself. I will still be loyal, even when you're not loyal to me. Because that's what a friend does. Never lets you down. Is always there, always sacrificing. You can run away, you can deny me, you can betray me, you can forsake me. You can fall asleep on me, but I'll still be a friend. This tells us that there is a friend that sticks closer than a brother. There is a friend whose wounds are faithful in the sense of his wounds on the cross are still faithful for us. There is a friend who loves at all times. John would write in his epistle, not his gospel, the same guy who wrote this, said, hereby perceive we the love of God, because he laid down his life for us. God laid down his life for us. Paul writes and says, God proved his love for us, and that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. How did he prove his love? He was faithful. He was sacrificial. He went to the cross. I'll put it this way. In the cross, Jesus befriended you. In the cross, Jesus sent you a friend request. And this is the secret. If you don't hear this, you can't be his friend. If this is lost on you, you're not going to be his friend. This is the secret. This is where the friendship is based. that I will open up and I will be vulnerable and I will be transparent and I will sacrifice and I will be loyal and I will befriend you in the cross, not because of you, but because of me, and you have a choice. Do you accept that? Do you reject that? Do you ignore that? You just push that to the side? You say, I don't want to ignore that. I don't want to reject that. I want to accept that. I want to be the friend of God. Who wouldn't want to be? If that's possible, I would want to be. How would I accept the friend request? Well, verse 14 tells us, ye are my friends if you do whatsoever I command you. You say, hold a time out, Pastor. You said Jesus is my friend and he's going to give himself for me, and now I'm his friend if I do whatever he says? That sounds like a dictatorship. That sounds like he's a drill sergeant. No. You got it all wrong. Let me see if I can try to illustrate this and we'll be done. Tuesday morning, about 7 a.m., my best friend, other than Jesus, my wife, went into labor with our fourth-born Deacon. And to fast forward to the end, Deacon is born fine, Maggie's okay, all is well. I don't think they're here this morning, but they'll be here soon enough, next week or something, you'll see them. But all is well, everything's good, okay? But 7 a.m., Maggie goes into labor, and for 18 hours, they say that like the more kids you have, the faster labor goes. Wrong. This is the longest labor yet. 18 hours. Tuesday morning started, Wednesday morning early he was born. But I watched my best friend sacrifice and give of herself and be extremely vulnerable and open, not for her, but for our son, for our family. And during those 18 hours, she asked a few things of me. A few, not a lot, but a few. She asked me to open the blinds and to let the sun in. It was a beautiful day, kind of midday on Tuesday. She asked me to get her some ice chips. She asked me to turn on her birthing baby playlist so that she could stay motivated. She asked me not to fall asleep and to watch the baby's heart rate on the monitor. So for a couple hours, I just stared at the monitor. 152, 156, 163, 152, 152, 152, 143, 110, roll over, did that for a while. She asked me to get the doctor because it was time. We went through that. Say, how demanding of her. How bossy of her to tell you what to do, to expect you to serve her. No way. I was glad. I was happy to serve her. If you are a generation of yesteryear and you never got to be in the birthing room to see those moments of life begin, then I feel bad for you. Because those moments are special. They're extremely humbling, but extremely love-engendering. To see the sacrifice, to see the loyalty, to see how opened up someone is. And to go get ice, there was no part of me that get your own ice. Figure it out yourself. That was small, it was little. It was little, right? When you understand this, and it's not lost on you, when you understand that Jesus befriended me, and Jesus opened himself up to me, and Jesus laid down his life for me, and he took my sin, and he paid my price. For him to say, you're my friend, if you reciprocate and do what I tell you to do, is not a dictatorship. That's not unreasonable. That's not crazy. That's not bossy. He can be your Lord and your master and you do what he says while at the same time being your friend. It makes sense that would be the case. Jesus gave himself for you. That's the bottom line. God befriended you. That's almost blows my mind. But he comes in the flesh and gives of himself and says, watch me open up. I'll call you friend. Watch me give of myself for you. I'll call you friend. And he wants to come into your life. He wants to be your companion. He wants to be your guide. He wants to be your friend. The question is, will you accept that? Will you welcome him? Will you follow him? And if you say, yes, I welcome you, I accept you, and I follow you, then you can be his friend.